over.
What's wrong with this thing?
Cool. All right, we're good?
We're good.
Okay, cool. So welcome everybody. Today we're going to be going over Burp Suite as mentioned previously. So like I said, I'm going to be sticking with community extensions. We're going to go over Burp Suite's primary functionality. We're going to go over some extensions that are freely available that are actually really neat. We're going to go over a little bit of maybe, if we have time, some command line tools just to fill the gap if necessary. But we're just going to be giving a brief overview of some of the great things of Burp Suite and some of the lesser known facts. Certainly, if you're not looking for some of these configuration options, you're not going to find them. You may not even know they exist. That's basically what we're going to do. We're going to take a look at we're going to test the request on Go Vanguard because I know that's a clean site for us to hit. So we'll submit data there, and then that'll be our testing ground for all of this stuff. And if Christian yells at me afterwards, it is what it is. So
do that one, do a Sonos too. Either one.
Oh yeah, that's true. So as far as Burp Suite goes, so normally the way that I set this up, and this is something that I found out today that's really useful. Normally what I do is I set it up to do a system proxy when I am testing. This is because sometimes I'll test applications that are running from the command line, or not from the command line, sorry, but from the local system, things that aren't browsers, right? And so in some cases, you may actually need to do that to get it to redirect. So the way that works is when you set up the Windows system proxy as opposed to like I think Firefox has proxy settings built into it. If you set it up in Windows, what will actually happen is the underlying web request call. So Windows provides an API to make these web requests. It will actually inject at a lower level the proxy settings in there, and it does it basically transparently. So any applications that are using the Windows API for HTTP requests, they get picked up automatically. It's really nice, really clean, and helps you capture a lot of things. You can use it for a variety of different local applications. You can use it for things like, if you have like business applications that connect maybe with an API that's running locally, or if you have games. I've used it specifically for games as well in the past. Check out the API responses, and you can find some very interesting things that they don't expect you to see. But I'm not going to go into too much detail about setting up Burp proxy because I'll assume that you've got it set up. I'll assume that you've got the certificates installed. If anybody has questions about it, we can kind of demo it if you do have questions, but I'm going to assume that everybody knows how to get the certificates installed and go through all that. So basically 100
videos on YouTube on doing that if you do need some help with that one. Just Google set up the proxy on Burp Suite. You'll find a YouTube video. It's about 2-3 minutes long. Very easy process.
It doesn't take very long at all. It is very easy, to Travis's point. So so basically what I would normally do when I first get Burp Suite, I would set it up under system. We're not going to do that today. We're actually going to be using Firefox for it. So some of the basic things we'll go over. Let's load up govanguard.com. So I'm going to go over just sporadically. We'll jump around a little bit because I didn't have any exact notes for this, but let's see. So one of the big things to start off is when we load up our proxy initially, and we have the proxy going, which we don't have the proxy going. Set this up real quick, actually. I'll do it through system proxy settings because I have another plugin that works really well that I'm going to save, but I don't want to jump right into that. So reload that. We should be able to go to Vanguard. There we go. So one of the things you'll notice when you first load up is Burp Suite catches a lot of information. It catches from every single website that you actually connect into here. It's a little verbose and noisy. Now, when you're doing engagements, what I commonly find is that applications will reach out, in some cases, to multiple websites that are APIs provided by the company that you're testing. So for instance, let's say Google, right? So let's say that you're on Google's website and you're testing, say, accounts.google.com. What you may find is that it has a lot of API requests that go to oauth.google.com or something like that. Well, the problem is when you're getting into it, you don't want to spend a lot of time tracking down these different subdomains. What you can do, this is a really neat trick. You can go into the target settings And you can go into scope here. And so normally, if you were to add something to scope, like let's say we want to add HubSpot, we'd right click and add a scope. And I just always say no on that. And it'll just add the website verbatim. But a really cool thing that you can do to actually catch all subdomains, everything that's part of your scope here as far as your domain. And note that this won't catch things that don't match the expression. What you can do is you can enable advanced scope control, and you can add in. So let's say we're going to test Go Vanguard. We add govanguard.com into the scope. And what this is going to do is this will do a regular expression match, which basically means that if the host IP or range, so basically if the host address, which is the host name, the subdomain, whatever, if it matches, if any of it matches govanguard.com, it's included in scope. It's a really nice way to be able to filter everything out quickly. And you don't have to spend like 20 minutes pulling, oh, this is the domain that we hit, this is the domain, this is the domain. I do recommend not relying too much on this, however, because what sometimes can happen, as I've noted, is that it may go to a third-party service that you do want to capture requests for that may not be named govanguard.com. You know, it may not have that in it at all, in which case it would be excluded from the scope. But if you do know what domains you're going for instance, if you have a rules of engagement that list off the certain subdomains that you'll be testing, this is a really great way to do it. Really fast, works really well, cleans up your workspace very, very nicely. And if we go over here now to proxy, we can click into the filter settings here. We can show only in scope items, and this will filter it down. So now we only have the Go Vanguard assets. So nice little way to filter that out. What you can also do here, let's see. Another cool trick that not a lot of people know about is the sequencer. So sequencer is actually a really neat tool. It's kind of niche, but if you know how to use it, it's actually pretty powerful. So what sequencer does, if we right click this request and send to sequencer, we can actually, this is a concept of the measurement of entropy. So for instance, if there is a website that you are logging in or authenticating to that provides you a session ID or a cookie that authenticates your user account, and it's not a JWT, right? It's just an ID, right? We want to see how random that session value actually is. We want to make sure that it's not some custom implementation, that they're not using something like, you know, pseudo cryptographic random. You know, what you can do is you can send to sequencer, and sequencer will, based on what you tell it to repeat, it will resubmit the same request over and over again, and it will examine the differences between whatever you tell it to examine. Now, what that does is after it examines the differences, it compiles a statistical analysis of the entropy of those different values. So for instance, if it is using a pseudo cryptographic generation for the session ID, what you may find is that there may be a bias for, say, the session ID to start with the number 1, right? Or it may have a bias to start with the letter A, or it may just seem to bias lower bit values. You know, you have no idea. You have no idea just looking at it, but if you do analysis of the entropy, you can actually see pretty clearly when the values are not actually random. So if we go in, so we've sent it to sequencer now here. You can configure it to come from a cookie or a form field. I'm going to do custom location here. Let's see. I don't know if we actually have any values that are random, but this is fine. So I'll say, let's say that we want to test, let's say we want to test the link, right? So we're going to grab the start and end here. When we highlight it, it's going to see it's updating at the top there. It'll basically say, this is the value that we want to extract and analyze. So, or you could do, regex if you want to get fancy with it. But this should be enough in most cases. So we'll say this, we'll say, okay. See, we've got it, it'll say from JSON to link. So it's, it's just defining the scope here. It's going to start from the end of the, or from, let's see, from /JSON. Oh, I see. So it's starting from the end of this, and then it's continuing until it hits X cache. And then what we'll do, and this is very important here, if you are using sequencer, make sure that you set a throttle, because if you don't set a throttle, you're going to flood the site, and you don't want to do that, because if the site is, if the site doesn't have a whole lot of horsepower behind it, you're going to take this thing down with a DOS potentially, and nobody's going to be happy about that.
That's going to be an event for your customer and you.
Yeah, you never want to do that. Now, to that note, in some cases you can accidentally do that, but accidents are different from mistakes like this. Like if like there's a difference between submitting one request and it's like, oh, it's shut down like that. That's uncontrollable. You have no idea what's going to happen. But if you submit 5 threads with a 0 millisecond delay, it's not good. So anyways, so what we'll do, I'll bump it down to something like 3, and we'll do like 200, maybe. We'll do 150. 150 should be fine. And once you've got all your settings configured, hit start live capture. Now you'll see up here, we're capturing tokens as it goes through. This is, by the way, this is 3 with 150 milliseconds. That's fast. Can you imagine 5 with 0? So once you get 100 tokens, what happens is it allows you to do this analyze now option. So we're going to stop it here. So we have a list of 210 requests with different tokens. Now, if I copy the tokens here, you can actually see what these token values were. So I'm just gonna open this text, and boom. So we'll see that all these tokens are the same thing because we just selected a header basically. But if you're pulling session IDs, these are going to be all the session IDs that you generated in that request. So for instance, you would be submitting like a login request or something like that to be able to pull these session IDs. So that's just to see what they are. Now we're going to do the analysis. So if we analyze now, we don't get any pretty charts here, but we do get a review. We would get a pretty chart if this was an actual statistical analysis, but this isn't. So we do get a result though. The overall quality of randomness within the sample is estimated to be extremely poor. At a significance level of 1%, the amount of effective entropy is estimated to be 0 bits. So there's 0 bits of entropy. It is not different. Not a single value is different from the next. So this is a really easy way. It even shows you a little significance level on the chart here. And then I think they even have like, if you go in here, they have different like tests that you can go through for like FIPS. It's got a whole bunch of different analysis options. You don't really need to do that. To be entirely honest with you, the graphs look pretty, but for practical purposes, just look at the values up here. Is it extremely poor? Is it 0 bits? If the entropy is, if the entropy is considerably low, then it might be a concern that they're not generating it with secure random, which is cryptographic random. It's a nice little moderate to advanced analysis that not a lot of people really do a whole lot with, but it's very easy to do, and it's very easy to do in Burp Suite. Sequencer makes it just a breeze. So you have some other options here, but I won't go into that. So that's a cool little trick with Burp Suite here. What you can also do, so that's basically it for Sequencer. We'll touch on Sequencer. For Decoder, I don't recommend Decoder unless it's just fast and easy. If you need to do anything worth anything, I would try CyberChef, which I can show off a little later.
Why don't you plan to show them that? That's a really, really cool thing that doesn't get talked about hardly ever.
We'll come back to that then. But Decoder is nice if you do have like, you have something you want to mess around with, like if you've got a payload that comes back that's base 64 and you just want to get what the value is or something like that. I don't think we have anything like that on here. But if I just, select this and send a decoder, you can also encode as. So let's say that we want to take a block of text and encode it as like a, URL. You can do that here. You can chain it together a little bit. So we can take the URL and encode it to like, we can code it to hex, we can base 64 it. So it's very bare bone. CyberChef can be way better for it, but we'll save that for another day. So, Decoder, use it when you need to. You can also send it to Decoder you can also do a lot of that stuff for encoding inline. Like if you send this to Repeater, what you can do is you can grab this and you can right click and you can go convert selection URL, and then you can use the hotkeys, or you can URL all encode, or URL encode all characters, and then Unicode encoding. I have a love-hate relationship with the way that they do this, because quite frankly, I would prefer it if it was using like JSON Unicode, because what I always do is I convert it like this, and then I have to go back and do this, or I just paste it into Visual Studio Code and then control replace and fix it. Basically, the reason why you would do, for those who aren't aware, the reason why you would do like this sort of encoding where it's a Unicode encoding, it's very commonly used in JSON payloads. And what you can do is you can actually bypass a lot of basic WAF filters, and even some of the ones that just don't check the content as thoroughly as converting it back from Unicode and actually interpreting the JSON content. You can bypass a lot of those WAFs very simply by encoding your payload in this. Reason being that when it gets to the back end and it's deserialized from JSON, this value is going to show up as basically text. The application is going to interpret this as ASCII characters. So this is going to look to the application, it's going to look like this. But when the WAF sees it, it's going to look like this garbage. They're not going to interpret that. They don't know what it means. And unless the WAF is smart enough to be able to take that JSON payload and actually, decode it, or deserialize it rather, and then inspect those values, it's not going to pick up on this. So that is decoder, that's sequencer. Comparer is a nice ish tool if you need to use it. I wouldn't incredibly recommend Comparer either. There are better options available. In a lot of cases with Burp Suite, it tries to do everything, which is good. If you need a Swiss Army knife when you need it, it works out. But I'm probably going to prefer a machete if I'm trying to cut down a tree. I'm not going to take the little saw blade and stand there for half an hour. So,
Are there any major differences between the community and Pro for Decoder or Compare? Are they better in Pro or same things?
Functionality, I believe functionality is the same. I know Pro gives a lot of, quite literally professional features across Burp Suite. Like if you need to save and load projects, that's something that it gives you. I know that they give you access to a lot of extensions as well under the plugins tab, which is pretty good actually. A lot of those plugins. I want to check out some more actually. While I was researching for this, I found some I wanted to play with, some that I haven't used prior to this, but they do give quite a few plugins to do some neat things. But I don't think there's any difference between Decoder and Comparer now. They're basically the same. Any plugins I recommend? We're going to get to that here very quickly. So just to wrap up what we're doing for the basic stuff, I'll do Logger, and I'll show you some burp settings, some actual burp settings, and then we'll do the extensions. So Logger is a way to capture all of requests that come out of Burp, including requests that come from extensions. You're not going to really use this a lot of the time. Maybe if you're like debugging an extension, you'll use it, but you've got the proxy tab, you're going to be working out of that. You're really not going to be working out of Logger a whole lot, but it is there, and that is what it does if you're wondering. Let's see, I don't think I'm missing anything.
Never once.
Yeah. There's a learn tab as well, but we can disable that actually. And that's what I'm going to show in here in a second. Intruder, we didn't show intruder. Intruder is a very basic way to enumerate values or brute force something, but it's very basic. There's better tools that do exist depending on what you're trying to do, but it's here if you need it. And to be honest with you, I have used this in a professional capacity because it's just there. Like let's say that here's a good example. Let's say that you are working on an application and you find that the application has an insecure direct object reference vulnerability, or at least there's a potential for that. You see that there's an ID that is exposed in the query parameters that is set to $ID equals 110. Well, the logical thought is, what does 111 do? What about 112? What about 100? Do any of those values result anything? Do I have access to those? A really great way to check multiple of those values at the same time is Intruder. It's very simple to do. So for instance, if we go in here and we want to, let's say we want to enumerate, let's say that we give a QID equals to, and we'll just add this. This is how you add where you want it to replace values as Intruder enumerates through these requests. This is how you add in where you want it to replace. So for instance, if I wanted it to replace like trailers down here, I could select it and go add, and it's going to replace it there. But we'll put it up here for now. And what we'll do, I don't mess with these normally, but I just use Sniper in most cases. We'll go in here and we'll say numbers. This is a very common one that I use. And we'll say sequential. We'll say from 10 to 20, and we'll do one step in between. And let's see, resource pool. So we set up the main request. We have the request that we're going to go to. We say we want it to go here. We say we want to go numbers is what basically numbers are the values that we're going to inject in this QID parameter here. We're going to go from 10 to 20 in steps of 1. So 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Resource pool. Very important for you to configure. Once again, if you do not configure resource pool, it will blow up the system. It will hit it as hard as it can. Please configure it. So what I normally do, if you click in, it'll automatically create a custom resource pool. I believe you can save these. I've never needed to. Yeah, I've never needed to save them, so I've never messed with it because it's, I mean, honestly, it's fast enough. You just click in. If you do more advanced stuff with it, which, you know, there's better tools out there, but if you do want to use advanced stuff for it, you can save these. Normally, I just do a delay between requests. You can add random variations. You know, there's a couple fancy options here that are nice to have, but normally I just set to like, we'll say like 150. And with all those options configured, and we don't really need to do, I don't think we need to do any of this other stuff here. We can start the attack. Demo version, some functionality disable and text or time throttle. Okay, well, that's fine. So what we get here is this is the intruder dialog. So we see that we submitted a couple of requests here. And it actually looks like that. Oh, because it was cached. That's why it was doing that. Okay. Or no, was this a redirect? Okay. Well, anyways, basically what intruder does, as you can see, goes through, so we can see in our request, we have QID 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. It does allow you to see very quickly, very easily, you know, whether or not payloads differ because or responses rather differ because you can see the length. So if there's something that looks a little out of alignment, you know, the length is way off, like if the length goes to 0, which I've had happen before after just like 5 requests. Like if you're hitting an endpoint to enumerate something and it goes to 0 after that, and you've accidentally crashed the endpoint, maybe that's an indication to stop, which you can do as well. This attack, I believe, yeah, you can pause it up here and stop it. But you know, watch it while it's running. If you're doing something a little more intense, make sure that you're not getting any sort of failed status codes either. I will say another neat trick that you can actually do with this, I will show before moving on. You can actually do match. Now, match is really cool. So I normally clear this list. If you want to keep it, you can. These are just default settings. But let's say that we are enumerating these endpoints and we want to highlight ones that have like, I don't know, we'll put Go Vanguard in there, but let's say, gosh, I don't even know what to put in there. We'll just say Go Vanguard, that's fine. Basically what this is going to do, if you add it in, it's going to mark them, it's going to flag them if they contain this value. So if there's a specific value that you know is going to come back if the response that you're looking for is found, you can have it flag it for you automatically. And if we run it back again, I think it's going to highlight them all if I'm not mistaken. That or allow a little checkbox to show, yeah, okay. So we have Go Vanguard here flagged up in this box. If it doesn't find it, it's not going to flag it, I don't believe, but it's just a nice little way to quickly determine if there's a value that you're looking for, whether or not it's in the request. So that is basically it. And then I'll go into settings.
One way that I'll use intruder quite a bit for like external network pen tests is if you come across a login portal. So as an organization, we don't brute force any people's real user accounts on any production thing, right? We're not trying to get anybody locked out of their accounts or anything like that. So it's not really something I'm going to use for an egress route. But if I'm going through and I'm just looking at different vulnerabilities, and I see like if you put in an incorrect username and you hit, you know, log in, it tells you like the user does not exist. That's not good, right? Because you could then enumerate what users do exist by feeding in a big list, right? That's an issue. It's not generic enough. Well, if it's not giving you a generic message and it's allowing you to enumerate who does exist, can you also make infinite requests to it with those different users? So I might pop it into intruder with username test, and then like for payload 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, send like 25 requests. If I'm still getting 200s and there's no errors, then it's kind of elevated the severity of that risk, right? Because on one hand, I can enumerate the users of the system, and 2, there's no rate limiting or brute forcing protections in place. So that's something to let a client know about, and it's probably on the high, low, if not a moderate range at that point. So even though I'm not going to load in 2,000 users and use Burp Suite for password spraying. There's a better way. There's other tools like O365 spray if it's Office 365, way better, way better. But it is really convenient, like Dennis said, for checking those things that are pretty quick and just give a little bit of additional insight as you're going along through your analysis.
Yep. And as looks like, I was just glancing over at chat, it looks like Michael notes that intruder is a cool way to test lockout timers as well. And if they reset after a successful login, that is, yeah, that's a good way to use intruder. Hit it and see if it locks. So, but to continue on with settings, and then we'll move over to extensions real quick here. I know we're about halfway point, so this is good on time, I think. Burp does have certain settings up here that you can configure. A lot of people don't mess with this ever, but there are a couple settings I'll make you aware of that are, you know, maybe useful that you may not have known existed up here. So proxy settings, not a whole lot in there. Let's see, where was it? I was looking for one specifically that I saw that was actually kind of neat. It was, so they have some TLS settings in here as well. Like you can see the different, you know, TLS endpoints that's picked up before, or the TLS certificates that's picked up from endpoints before. That's what I mean to say. They have some hostname resolution overrides. So if you want to test, say, a certain IP address with a given hostname, you can override that here. Very niche, but you know, you can do it. User interface. This is something that's actually kind of neat. I didn't know about this until I played around. There's a dark theme for Burp Suite. I feel like an idiot because it's such a simple thing, but I never look for it. You never look for it. You don't know it exists, but there is a dark theme. You can also disable the Learn tab. So the Learn tab at the top here that gives all the guides. If you want to keep that there and, you know, access resources, you know, related to you know, educating yourself on Burp Suite, it's there. But if you already know enough about Burp Suite, you can disable it. It's just preference there. And another thing that was kind of neat, hotkeys. You can edit hotkeys here for a lot of this stuff. So for instance, repeater and intruder are bound to Control R and Control I. To be honest with you, I always just right click, but I can Control R. Yeah, see, it's simple things like that like you don't think about. Like, you know, I'm doing this every day. You know, I right click, I send it, it goes fine. There's more efficient ways to do it though, and you may not even know they exist unless somebody points it out to you. So that's the reason why I bring that up there, just because I had no idea. I'm going to convert this back to light though, just because, well, it's nighttime. We'll leave it in dark. I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure people appreciate that. So going back over to extensions here, I've got a couple loaded up. I've got Turbo Intruder, Auto Rise. Copy as Python request is a cool one that I actually found recently. SSL Scanner and PwnFox. So SSL Scanner, I'll start with some of the weaker ones. SSL Scanner is a very niche tool. Travis, I don't know if you're familiar with this one or not, but this is basically like, yeah, this is basically like SSLize in Burp is essentially what this is. And one of the nice things I will say about this is that if you aren't as well versed with, you know, TLS vulnerabilities, although SSLize does do a good job of saying, hey, you know, these are not recommended to be enabled and they are enabled, maybe you should fix it. This actually tells you what specific vulnerabilities can be exploited against this, whereas SSLize just says, hey, don't do that. So for instance, if we give govango.com, I hope this doesn't come back with anything. That'll look really silly, won't it? Test failed. Did I spell that wrong? Govango.com, right?
Yeah.
It is TLS. Connection failed. Well, this wasn't happening in testing.
That's why we do it live. Keep it exciting.
Yeah, we do it live. So like Bill O'Reilly said, we could do google.com because it just connects and pulls the TLS certificate down. I don't think Google online. So what google.com comes back as, you see it'll run through some of these and check it out. And it does do it very quickly. So what it actually does here, it gives you nice little scan results here. It shows you what versions of SSL TLS are supported. So SSL2 is not supported, SSL3 is not supported, TLS 1 and 2, 1.0 and 1.1 and 1.2 are supported. So 1.1 and 1.0, you know, it's Google, so theoretically, you know, there's maximum compatibility, but TLS1 probably start getting off of that. They use 3DES here, which again, it says, yeah, but it's not recommended. And, you know, 3DES technically, you know, it's pretty secure-ish, but it's not really going to get any better. It's only going to get worse. So maybe don't use it. It does show vulnerable to Suite 32. And you can actually scroll down here and you can see in detail. So Suite 32 is vulnerable, Lucky 13 potentially, and Breach potentially. It'll actually show you what.
There, but it's 1.0 and CBC ciphers. That'd be beast, wouldn't it, Dennis?
Yeah, that would be beast. Yes, exactly. That would be beast. So, but you know, it's a nice little tool to point this out. And Lucky 13 as well. So I believe Suite 32 is the beast vulnerability that's exploited, if I'm not mistaken. And I know Lucky 13 is the one that is theoretically vulnerable. Lucky 13 is like it's a CBC padding oracle from what I recall. So basically you can mess around with the padding in such a way that you can do a timing attack if I'm remembering correctly. But that's just from memory. And then if you scroll down a little further, it shows you, oh yeah, you know, here's supported ciphers by vulnerability, and it shows you which ones are vulnerable to what. So, you know, it's complaining, oh, you know, all the TLS1 ciphers are there. It's complaining about TLS 1.2, probably because these are CBC. I don't think it's, interestingly, it doesn't list that it's CBC there. Wonder why. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't list CBC. It's implied that these are CBC for Lucky 13, though. And then triple DES. Maybe don't use triple DES. So that's a nice little tool that you can use. If you, and also it does rate them, which is funny at the bottom here. I see that it rates them based on their recommended severity. So it's like, you know, informational, medium, low. That's kind of cool. So if you don't know a whole lot about TLS vulnerabilities, this is a good way to kind of, I guess, get into it to see what's going on with, you know, whatever website you're checking out. Yeah, it's a it's a poor man's SSLIs, and you know, it works okay. I have no complaints with that. I have no idea why it didn't work on GoVanguard.com though, so minus points for that for making me look silly on the call here.
I just posted a link for SSLIs if you're not familiar with that tool. It's in Kali by default. It's super simple. It does the same thing.
Yeah.
Just from the
Yeah.
command line. Works in Windows too.
Yeah, I started to say one of the nice things about it is you can get it on Windows. It's pretty easy to get on there. So so that's SSL scanner. Let's see, let's skip over. I'll do copy as request ones really quick. So for those of you who are programmers or at the very least familiar with Python, what a nice thing, I found a very nice thing that you can do, which is copy as request with this extension. So what you can do is, let's say that we want to take this request to GoVanguard.com and we want to develop, say, proof of concept in Python that leverages some advanced logic that can easily be you know, implemented in like Burp Suite Intruder or something that requires, you know, more finesse or something. Or let's say you just want to develop proof of concept in general. What you can do to speed up that process rather than copying and pasting manually back and forth, you can actually go to the request, right click it, go to extensions once it's installed, copy as request. You can copy as requests. And then what it'll do is it'll give you Python code that executes that request, which I thought was really neat. So
I've seen the copy as curl. I've never seen the copy as Python.
You got to have the extension for it to show up, but it is a very neat request. You can also do it with session objects. So if you're doing there we go. So like if you're doing copy a session, it'll actually set up a session. Now what's really neat about this is, let's say that we want to do these two back to back. You can select them both by, you know, holding control and left clicking, and you can right click, copy as request with session object. And what you'll see it do is it will establish the session. That way your cookies will save, and then it will perform those requests. Although it looks like in this case, it had a little bit of a hiccup because it looks like they're backwards. It may just be the sorting order on this. I bet if I change this around, it'll work. I haven't messed with this too extensively, but I did think it was pretty neat. Yeah. So absolutely, just flip it around and boom. So if you have a very complex, this is the really neat part. If you have a very complex flow that is like 18 requests and you don't want to do it in Python, because let's be honest, there are some cases where that happens, specifically if you're working with things. The one I think of that comes to my mind is something I've done personally. I've had a lot of games, like login flows for games when it's doing an API call. What you'll find is a lot of those requests will occur in a flurry when it first opens up, like it does a whole bunch bunch of connections. It's like initialization, right? It logs in, gets the settings, goes back and forth, communicates the current state of the game, everything like that. You can just select all those. I wish I had this. You can select all those, right click, copy to request, paste in a session object. It's quick and it's dirty. You're not going to get an A+ for the code rating on it. If you got like a formatter, you can make it look prettier, but it's a fast way to do it, and it's pretty neat. And it makes developing proof of concepts way, way easier.
That's mind blowing to me. Out of curiosity, Michael, Andreas, have you guys seen? Did you guys know you could do that in Burp Suite? This is the first time I've ever seen that.
No, I was in chat. I've been grabbing fetch requests from the dev tools. It's going to save me so much time. So good stuff.
Yeah, it's cool.
Cool, awesome. So some of the other cool extensions we'll go through here. So we've done SSL scanner, we've done copy as request, turbo intruder. I'll do turbo intruder authorize, and I'll save PwnFox for last because PwnFox is really cool. I really like PwnFox. I will be honest and transparent here. I have not used PwnFox a whole lot previously, but I've discovered it, and I drank the Kool-Aid. I am converting to PwnFox. With that statement, turbo intruder. So what turbo intruder is, so we're familiar with Burp Suite intruder. We've gone over Burp Suite intruder. It's a very basic way of doing it. Turbo intruder is like that on steroids. It's really crazy. I don't think it's probably, how to say this? I don't think it's the easiest thing to work on, right? I think the turbo intruder is a little finicky to mess with. Personally working with it, it's not my favorite thing to work with. But if you need to get something done fast, that is fast, it's a great thing to use. So what we can do here is we can take this request and we can right click, extensions, turbo intruder, send to turbo intruder, and we get this nice little dialog here. So what turbo intruder actually does is, functionally, it's the same as intruder, but you can do a whole lot with it. So for instance, or it's a lot more custom is what I mean to say. That's probably a better way to put it. So let's say that we want to send a whole bunch of requests to a target endpoint. So you got to write it down in Python, unfortunately. But what we'll do is we'll say, oh, okay, we're going to take this, I'm going to say for I in range, let's say like 100 or something like that. And then you want to do some fancy logic, you want to like pick a random number or something, you can do that if you wanted. I think they've got some examples in here as well. So if you want like references, like if you want to do like rate limit testing, you can pull it up here. It'll go through. You can import libraries. I believe I'm not sure which libraries it provides. I've never needed to do too much of this out of Turbo Intruder besides like hitting it very fast is typically what I use it for, just because the throughput's so great on this. But Turbo Intruder is a nice little way to speed up your request. So if we do 3 to 8, and you basically do engine queue, it's going to queue up a request. So this is going to queue up 2 requests here because it's got this one. We'll do this, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, let's see, request handle response. If we submit this, which I thought there was another setting, I guess not. If we submit this to the Go Vanguard website here, engine warming up. Okay, well, this did not work as intended. The request has payloads. Oh, I see. That's the problem. It's me being dumb. So basically the way it injects in is you would do like a format string here. So once you do that, there we go. And see, it submitted a couple of random values in here, and we've submitted it very quick. I don't know if you saw how fast that was. Lightning speed. That's the whole point of Turbo Intruder. It's normal intruder just on steroids. So if you have a little bit more advanced functionality that doesn't require you to pull it into its own proof of concept, or if you just want to go fast, Turbo Intruder. Not a whole lot more to say with that. Very straightforward. Let's see. AutoRise. Now AutoRise. Me and AutoRise, best friends. AutoRise is a very cool tool. So in a lot of cases, you will have 2 accounts. When you are working on a penetration test, you will have 2 logins, and they will often be different access levels. So you'll have like an admin account, you'll have a user account. So a lot of times, if you were to do it manually, you would have to say, oh, okay, I go to this admin endpoint. And to be honest, when I started off, that's how we did it. But what you can do is, rather than submitting to the admin endpoint and copying the admin endpoint, going to the user account and then submitting it there and saying, oh, it doesn't work, and then going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, such a time sink. AutoRise will do that for you. What you basically do is you give it, you set up your session so that you're, acting as an admin account. And then let's say you set up a second session for a user. You basically tell AutoRise, okay, every request that the admin makes, every request that I make that's in scope, basically is what you tell you. Say every request I make that's in scope, and you're going to be acting as the admin. I want you to try this request again against the website, but change the cookie to this value or change the session ID to this value. And when you do that, you're going to be acting as the second user. So if I turn AutoRise on and I've got it in scope, so I turn this on here, it's going to inject, we'll say authorization basic, should be good. What you will find, you have some settings up here that you can actually configure. If I refresh, you will see that this is submitting these back, and it doesn't look like it's actually doing it in scope. Did I miss something? I think I'm missing something here. Save, restore. I should be doing it only for things. Oh, see, now I'm acting like a noob here. Best response views. I swear that there was.
Settings thing top right.
Is that where it is? No, that's burp settings. Yeah, I swear there was a setting in here. See, now it's gaslighting me too. Save, restore, remove duplicates, enforcement detection. Scope, yeah, scope items only. Oh. Yeah, scope items only. Oh, wait, is that not a default? Okay, that's not a default filter. Okay. Whoops, my bad, guys. So now if we resubmit it, make note to add it to your default filters. So if we resubmit this here, what you'll see is that all of these are being resubmit and it's saying bypass. Now, the reason why it's saying bypass, I think I crashed it because I clicked into one of those MP4s. The reason why it's saying bypassed is as follows. It determines whether or not you are able to bypass an access control because it's going to assume that they're different permission levels, right? If the results of the request are the same, that indicates that you have bypassed it, right? Because you're acting as the admin and then it's submitting it back as the user. And if the results are the same, then theoretically you've bypassed it. So it's going to say that by default for bypass. Now, if the content of the response is different, or if the length of the response is different, it's not going to say it's bypassed. It's going to be unsure. It's going to say like this. It's going to say like is enforced. Like, yeah, the content's different. It looks like it's enforced, like it looks like it's different, but it may not be. It doesn't know for sure. If you want to be certain, if you have values that you should get. So for instance, if you want to say enforcement detector, let's say a good example is status code not equals 200, right? Because if I am going to admin endpoints and it's resubmitting them as a user, shouldn't get a 200, should probably get like a 301, or maybe like a 403. Most of the times you'll probably get a 301 redirect to the login page, or you'll get a 301 redirect to an error page. Sometimes you'll get a flat 403, but regardless, shouldn't be a 200. And this is a really nice way to quickly determine if there's a broken access control between two accounts. So if you click into these requests here as well, you can go to the request response and you can actually check this out. You can see the modified request, modified response. You can see the original request and the unauthenticated request. The unauthenticated request is going to be your authorization basic here. So if we actually look, I believe, modified request, unless I'm mistaken here. Oh, no, here's the modified. Okay, no, it is mine. I got that backwards. So modified request contains our injected authorization header, and the original request is the one that we had submitted as the admin account. So, and you can go back and forth, you can check the responses and everything like that. You can also click this and you can go, or was it here? I believe it was here. Yeah. You can send, a little hard to read because we're in the dark theme, but you can send the original request to repeater, you can send the modified request to repeater, you can send the responses to compare. And what a really good thing to do is if you want to do it quick and dirty and you're wondering, hey, is enforced, why is it saying is enforced, did we bypass it? You can send the responses to compare. It'll get both of them in. You compare words, boom, we can see what changed. Right, it highlights it straight for us. Like I said, it's not going to be the best tool, but it's going to give you enough context to determine, hey, did we bypass it? Did we not bypass it? What's going on? So that is the gist of AutoRise. It makes it very simple for you to determine if cross-tampering abilities or cross-tampering vulnerabilities exist in an application. And finally, because I believe we're on our last one here, yes, PwnFox. So PwnFox requires you to do a little bit of setup before. Before we get started, Travis, have you messed with PwnFox at all?
Never heard of it.
You're going to love this. So PwnFox requires a little bit of setup before. You need to have Jython, so Java. I believe it's like a Java Python wrapper. You have to have it set up with Burp Suite. The way you do that, you go in.
There's so many of them that require that.
Yeah, it's a pretty common thing. You just download it and you set the standalone. You're set, no problem at all. You just got to configure it. And then you got to relaunch, of course. So if it complains that, hey, you need to install it still and you've set it here, just relaunch, you're fine. So once you get all that set up, you can install, let's see, you can install PwnFox. Now, a note on PwnFox, you actually can't install it from the Burp Suite store. You have to get it from GitHub. Yeah, but I'll show you what it does. So I've got Firefox set up here. It's already been configured and everything. It's already been set up. And it has, under the extensions, you'll notice it has uBlock Origin, because of course it does, but it also has PwnFox. And PwnFox, you install it through the Mozilla plugin store. It works great. But what it enables us to do is we no longer need to use system proxy, and you no longer need to use Firefox proxy either, because it will do it for you. So the really cool part about PwnFox is, if we go back, you see we've got our main content. Now, what I often find is that when I'm looking through requests, even if it's filtered to the website, there's a lot of junk. If I'm tabbing back and forth between different user accounts, one in incognito or in Chrome or something, and I'm going here and there, it kind of mixes up a little bit together, right? But with PwnFox, what you can do is you can go into the extension here, click into it, and I've got it set to proxify only container tabs. So basically what it does is when you've disabled system proxy, nothing's going to burp, right? Well, when you set it to only proxify container tabs, it will send specific tabs to burp, and other ones won't send at all. So you can keep one tab open and search. Now, it gets cooler, Travis. You'll see there's colors down here.
Wow.
This is the best part. Yeah, I know it's colorful, but it's better. If you click into one of these, so we've got a green, you see how it highlights it up here. We can also click in to do an orange. Watch this. If I go to govanguard.com, watch what happens in burp. It automatically highlights all requests with the tab's color. So if I go to this tab now and I submit it, it's all green automatically. It is a game changer. It is amazing. So I just found out about this recently. It's really cool. And so basically how it works, you can see it's got this little fingerprint up here. I believe that's an indication that it's basically set up like a proxy for this tab. And they're integrating natively with Mozilla for that, I believe. I'm not a Firefox guy, but that's what I interpret that to mean. Some of the cool things that you can do with PwnFox, you can go into settings if you're running it on like a different host or a different port. You can set that up here. Toolbox, I haven't had a chance to play around with Toolbox a little bit yet, so I don't know exactly what this does. If anybody has any idea in chat, please let me know. But I'm sure that it has some cool things that you can do with that. Yeah, basically you can set the burp settings there. You can go in. I want to go to Pocket. Yeah, I have no idea what that does exactly. You can remove security headers, proxify all tabs. To be honest with you, if you only proxy container tabs and you add the container header, by the way, you can add the container header, which is really cool. So if you go into these requests here, you'll see it actually adds an PwnFox color green. So if you're taking like a screenshot, you can know like, oh, this is what request it was from. Or you can tell whether or not, like if you're highlighting stuff with colors, and the colors happen to like overlap or something like that, you can click into it and say, oh, this is actually an orange one that we flagged. That's just to keep it nice and clean. So I do recommend having that injection on for the headers there. Basically, I think I think that's it for everything that I have for Burp Suite. I know we're 7 minutes early. I can go over some tools, or Travis, if you had anything you wanted to add, I'll throw it to you.
Only show them Cyber Chef real quick, just a brief one. I'll say, like, I know when Christian and I asked you to run this one tonight for Thursday, we gave you no information, right? No context at all. I think you knocked it out of the park here. What I love about it is that you took it and made it not the bare bones basic, any tutorial on YouTube version of Burp Suite. But what you did here was you did so many really cool tricks. Like, I've used Burp Suite for a couple of years now, very regularly. And most of what you said is just going to elevate my game at work. So I'm super psyched about that. But I think this recording that we've got here, more than a lot of the other ones that we've done, has a lot of replayability for people. So if you're new to web app pen testing, new to Burp in general, a lot of this might have gone over your head a little bit. If you go back to some of those tutorials that are, really ground floor, watch a couple of those and then watch Dennis again, you're going to retain so much more of it. And it's going to be, you're going to have that light bulb going off moment. So awesome job with that. And
Appreciate that.
While you pull up CyberChef, if anyone has any questions for Dennis, I mean, he's the best web app pen tester I know of. Feel free to unmute and ask, or throw it in the chat, whatever you're more comfortable with. It's a great opportunity to hold him hostage here live.
We'll give him a minute to unmute, and then we'll hop into CyberChef if no questions come in.
Wow. Well, we got that there. Next week, actually, for the first, so we're going to do another round of the Ask Me Anything style with Christian, myself, Dennis. If you can join us, Andreas, if you want to be involved, feel free. Absolutely, I think people would love that too. So we have a Microsoft Forms submission page right here, and I'll share this around on LinkedIn and everything over the next week or so. If anyone wants to submit any questions, they're totally anonymous. We'll go through and we'll answer them just like we did a few months back. It can be anything from cybersecurity career progression, it can be penetration testing, social engineering, it can be transitioning into cyber, anything you want. We're definitely we'll make next week very conversation style, and we'll get back into the more technical stuff as February goes on.
I do have a question you might be able to answer.
Go for it.
What is CORS?
Cross-origin resource. I want to say cross-origin resource sharing off the top of my head.
I'm trying to build a website right now. It's just a basic sort of thing, but over the past couple of years, I've been getting countless errors of my database preventing me from making calls to and from my front end and back end, and it's all because of CORS. It's actual hell. I hate it so much. I hate it.
It's funny you mentioned that. There's actually, I hear that quite often.
It's painful. I just want to make a freaking site and like all of this code works, but it doesn't anymore.
A lot of the problem. So yes, I agree with that sentiment. A lot of security settings in general are a balance of security and shooting yourself in the foot. And you got to find a nice middle ground. As much as I would love, for example, with Google and TLS, right? As much as I would love to recommend Google, hey, TLS, TLS 1.2, run, ECDHE, elliptic curve, use AES in GCN mode. They're never going to do it because it would kill all of their support for every client that connects to Google. And they have so many clients from so many places that are connecting. It's just not possible. As far as CORS goes, it is a pain. I feel for you. It's one of those things. It's like what's the other one? I want to say HSTS. Is that the one that enforces HTTPS? I want to say, yeah.
HTTPS.
Yeah. HTTP secure. That thing, if you enable that once and you set the time on it wrong, you'll never get like plain text connection. So if you're doing like development or anything like that, you got to clear. It's just a pain. It's a pain to mess with sometimes. So you got to be a little. You got to find a nice balance between that. But yeah, for CORS, I absolutely feel with that. Getting the settings tweaked on some of that stuff is just a pain.
Like I'm supposed to do something like allow headers, so that I'm literally just want my front end to talk to my back end. That's all. I don't know why it's an issue.
Yeah. I feel for you, man. Yeah.
From the many Google searches I have performed, it seems to be a cybersecurity sort of thing, but yeah.
It's it would take a little more to go into debugging and troubleshooting that, I think.
It sounds like a whole YouTube video that I need to find.
It might be.
Just to completely understand exactly what I'm dealing with, because this is a consistent issue for the past 2 years. I just can't get my front end to talk to my back end because some cybersecurity issue to literally prevent, like my code works, but the browser doesn't want it to.
Yeah, they're the same thing with HSTS. You can have that same thing occur. I did want to point out, I actually saw this in chat here. Andres, he said, I found Burp Suite to be useful in testing scripts. To that note, I would actually say, I do find Burp Suite useful for testing scripts as well. One of the things that I actually do, and I wanted to just call this out real quick. We have sometimes proof of concept code that actually is written either in Golang or Python. And what I found to be the case to make debugging much easier is if you route that through Burp Suite. So one of the things that I would say is a very useful note is that if you're developing proof of concept code and you're running into like a vulnerable, you're running into an issue where you can't figure out, why is my code not working or something like that, a really useful thing you can do if you're using requests is you can route it through Burp Suite for the proxy and just set like verify off for testing, and you can see the request go through entirely. You don't have to, do a bunch of print statements to figure out what's going on with the Python request object. It makes it really easy for debugging scripts. I just wanted to point that out because I saw that. And I think that was, and Dane, that was the other one. Dennis with PwnFox, am I able to log in 2 different users, make the colors a distinction? I believe you are, yes. If you have extensions set, for PwnFox to be enabled in incognito, because I'm not sure if it sandboxes the sessions. I'd have to check that. It might. I don't know if it can do that in Firefox with the level. I don't know what permission level the extension has. Basically, I'm a little new to it as well, but I believe at the very worst case, you could open up an incognito tab and then you could do it from there and have 2 different sessions like that. Or if you're doing, authenticated testing or do cross-role tampering, the better option would probably be use AutoRise to be able to do that in a more automated fashion rather than tabbing back and forth. But if you have specific things you want to do, yeah, you can do that. And then I think that was basically it for comments. I didn't miss any, did I, Travis?
I think you're caught up. So let's take a look at Better Decoder. I mean, CyberChef.
Cool, yeah. So one of the really cool things, so CyberChef is a free tool. You can get it on GitHub, you can download it. One of the nice things is you can get it and download it. It's in a zip, you just unpack it, and it serves it as an HTML file. You just open up an HTML file, it opens up in your browser, perfectly works offline. You don't need any online resources. It is really cool. So what you can do with it, basically, what can't you do with it? If you have any sort of payloads, so let's say that we've got this code here. This is it looks like a jQuery callback or something. It's not jQuery callback. What is this? This is some kind of JavaScript VP media element. So what you can do is you can paste this in. And you can do a whole bunch of transformations on it. So for instance, let's say that we want to look at this code. We can beautify it, and then we can do a syntax highlight on it, and then boom, now we've got like a mini editor down here. You can change what language it is, auto detect. Let's say that we want to convert it to base 64. We can do that. We can convert it to base 64. We got a base 64 payload right here. Let's say that we want to do some obscure stuff like I don't think they support, maybe they do, ASCII base 85. They support base 85 if we want to do some weird base 85 encoding. Oh, that's not too. We got base 85. It allows a whole bunch of transformations to be done on data, and it allows it to do it. Thanks for hanging out, Aldi. We'll see you around. But as far as the transformations that you can do, yeah, you can chain them together. You can do a whole bunch in a row. And we have used this extensively for customer testing. It makes it really easy to decode things and to see the results. But also, let's say that you have, and this is a case that we've ran into, let's say that they use a secondary encryption on top of TLS. So let's say that they're really good about something, but they're implementing on top of that. Well, let's further say that the key is static, and rather than writing a Python script to go back and take their whatever their payload is and then use the static key and decrypt it and have to go back and forth and run the Python script, rather than do that, you can actually do that here. So we can say AES decrypt. We can give it the key in hex, UTF-8, or base 64. So we could just give it the key. We'll pretend that maybe that's not going to work. Okay, well, whatever. And then we'll give it, we'll give it the IV in base 64 or whatever. And you can specify, is it CBC, GCM, is it hex, raw? What do you want it out as? And it'll actually come back and show you the results of that decryption operation. By contrast, you can also do the inverse. You can encrypt it. So let's say that we want to encrypt it. We're going to encrypt it. We're going to say, the password is password and the IV is, I don't know if it's going to let me do this or not. We'll see. No, because it's complaining because the key size is different. But there we go, 16. And bada boom, now we have AES encryption. You can do a whole lot with CyberChef. You can chain together. Let's say that we need to put it out. So it comes out as hex. Let's say we want it in base 64. There you go. And we're actually going to change that to raw for it to be base 64. But there you go. It's really neat tool. There is too much to cover here. See, it even parses HTTP requests. I mean, this thing, what can't it do? So I really recommend CyberChef. It's much easier to use compared to Decoder. It allows you to do advanced operations if necessary. And the great part is you can save it. So if you want to save this operation, you can do that. If you want to save, like, this is, save it as like JSON or whatever. If you want to save this to go back, like, let's say that's an app that you're going to retest or something, you can save the transformation, the AES encryption, and then you can reload it. So you don't have to recreate it. I mean, CyberChef is just a really neat tool. It's really free, and, it works great. So you can just download it up here. And I think it's, yeah. And then there you go. It's a zip file. And if we open it up, you can see it's got a HTML document. That's the entire thing for CyberChef. So really cool. I do recommend using it over Decoder whenever possible. And I know we're a little over time anyway, so that's a brief synopsis on CyberChef. We may go over it maybe a little more practically as we go through some of these other things in the future. But that's all that I have to say. So
Stop the